Hello everyone and welcome back to some Super Smash Bros. Ultimate World of Light without spirits and without the skill tree. This is part 26, so let's go. Now, in the last episode, we ended up getting to Darkon and Galeem, and today we're going to be defeating them. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Now, the first thing that I need to ask is, who are we going to be playing as? Thankfully, in the last episode, you guys responded. And you guys wanted to see 3 characters in particular. First up is Kirby. Next up, we have someone none other than Mega Man. And then finally, we have the Vampire Slayer himself, Simon. And with that out of the way, let's get right into the boss. Well, actually we need to assign what spirit we want to use. I like the one that we have equipped now, being absolutely nothing, giving us a wonderful team power of 0. And with that, we can finally start the boss. Well, or the boss level. There's actually 3 parts to it. The first being a vertical auto-scroller with enemy ambushes, the second being a boss rush, and the third finally being the final boss. So, let's get started. Now, the vertical auto-scroller is one of the easiest parts. Well, it is the easiest part. That's because all we have to worry about are a couple of these enemy ambushes. Thankfully, they aren't too incredibly difficult. And defeating all of these only took me about a couple of hours. More or less. But with that out of the way, we can go ahead and start taking them down. Oh look, the Incineroar finally learned how to be a Incineroar. That being, they upbeat off stage and they expected to recover, but instead they just went down to the death barrier. Next we're going to go ahead, we're going to get Peach's copy ability, just because it's a counter. Although, for some reason, sometimes when you get a copy ability, after the player that had it gets defeated, they'll, well, take away your copy ability. Like now I've lost Peach's copy ability. Although I've had it where other times, after that player is defeated, I'll actually still have their copy ability, like with Ridley up in a moment. But first we have to deal with all of these, well, Darkon boss fights, sort of. Because now Darkon's going to come off from the left side, and he's going to bring with him some of these spines that destroy platforms, as well as these evil pinwheels that will also do tons of damage. Now, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to attack the eye, and that will make him retreat. Now, he does retreat on his own, but that'll make you lose, well, any sort of benefits like a Maximum Tomato. Now, the way you're supposed to do that is just deal with him to make him retreat, but since we can't do enough damage to him, we physically can't do that. Instead, we just have to deal with him. But it's not that big of a deal. Now that we're in this section, though, it gets a little bit harder. That's because it's a 5-person free-for-all. Except everyone's on a team, except for you. We have all these fights. I ended up getting Ridley's copy ability, just because it's a projectile that is pretty spammable. And then we're able to move on. Well, not really. This is probably one of the longer sections. And I was just barely able to make it out alive through most of these fights. Well, by most of them I mean all but one. That being none other than the Wii Fit trainer. For some reason, I was having trouble with this, and I couldn't actually do enough damage to her. Instead, she ended up grabbing me and doing a back throw with me into the death barrier, probably because I had about 200%. But now we're down to Mega Man, who I was not completely used to, especially in a platforming sense. Because of that, he was a pretty awful choice for a vertical autoscroller. But I have good news and bad news. The good news is he wasn't in the vertical autoscroller. The bad news is because I couldn't even make it that far with him, and he ended up SDing off the bottom of the stage. But now we get Simon. Now, very quickly I learned that this guy is a powerhouse in this little map, in the entirety of this boss rush, and basically everything. He just does so much damage, and all of his projectiles have a lot of range. Now, he is a little bit slower, but it's still a pretty good trade-off against a lot of the things here. We're able to go up here. There we go. And now we're up to the last couple of platforms. This one is not too particularly difficult, but because I have almost no lives left, that being probably about 68% away from death, well, it didn't go well for me, to say the least. I made it kind of decently way through, but it was going to take some work. Alright. And now I'm dead. Alright, now that I'm back, I did a little bit better this time. Probably about an hour and a half in the future. And here I was able to go ahead, do some damage, and most importantly, I had all 3 of my lives left. And these allowed me to go ahead and sort of make it through all of these little sections. I ended up losing Kirby here, and then it was up to Mega Man. Now, Mega Man, I got a little bit better at through the hour and a half, but not by much. But good enough to be able to do some pretty serious damage. Now, one thing that I'm abusing here is the fact that Darkon and Golem will try to attack each other, even in their spirits. So just leaving these 2 teams, Golem and Darkon, to themselves, will let them attack each other. The only thing that could actually make this better is if I had Meta Knight from Brawl, and I could just do the invincible cape trick. But it's no matter, as we're actually getting pretty close. I thankfully still have Mega Man. Only a few more attacks, and we're pretty much good. There we go. Alright. Alright, here we go. I've almost got it, but this section takes a while because I'm trying to be as careful as possible. But now we're down to just Zelda. Alright, there we go. And there we go. We finally beaten this enemy ambush section. And we have 2 lives to spare. And I seriously mean spare, because we're going to need to not want them to be dead. Because we're pretty close to the top now. Although we do have one more little section. Alright, go up here. Avoid those. Alright, go up here. Now we have a little bit of a jetpack section where we have to avoid the bombs. Get another jetpack. Fly up. And there we go. Now we're going to have to avoid some more of these attacks. Thankfully nothing's that bad. And now we make it to the final enemy ambush section. You can see Galeem in the background, as well as Darkon. Alright. Now we're on to Simon, which is pretty good actually, because we probably can defeat these guys with just one character if that character is Simon. Although it is going to take a little bit of luck and a little bit of patience, as we're going to have to try to defeat them without taking much damage at all. And that means avoiding all their attacks while also trying to deal some damage. But long story short, it's hard, but we're able to do it. Alright, just a couple more attacks later. We got rid of Incineroar. All we have left is Bayonetta. And Rob. Alright, we got rid of Rob. And we got rid of Bayonetta. But now we have Ike. And there we go. Now we're on to the second phase. That being the boss rush. Now keep in mind, it was extremely difficult to even beat one boss with 1 life. Now we have to beat 6 bosses with 3 lives, all in one shot. And yes, I do know that you'll get 2 recovery hearts, but it's not that much of a help. Alright, go through here. Alright, we lost Simon. Now we are back to Curb. Alright. He's half down. Alright, avoid his attacks. Alright, we got this. Alright. Do down B. Down B. Avoid that attack. Hammer. Alright, we're still alive. Down B. Alright, come on, we can do this. We're so close. Well, not really. Alright, just a couple more attacks. Oh no. This is gonna take a while. Let's talk about these bosses. Now, while at first it might seem like they're all just regular bosses, that's not actually true. Now, for bosses like Marx and Gallium, yeah, it is true that they behave like regular bosses. They have telegraphed attacks that you can dodge, but you're supposed to fight, well, dodge their attack and then counterattack. Sort of like the bosses in The Legend of Zelda. But then you have bosses like, well, Giga Bowser and Rathalos. These bosses don't function like a regular boss. In fact, they function completely differently. They function like they're a Smash Bros. Fighter. It's important to make this distinction because they actually function completely differently. Now, unlike a regular boss, a Smash fighter is supposed to be taking damage and giving damage at the same time. That's why in tournaments, yes, people will actually take damage from both sides. The one with the least amount of damage taken will be the victor. These Smash Bros. Styled bosses function the same way. You do damage to the boss does damage to you. If you're, well, good enough at the game and have a high enough spirit, then, well, you'll be the victor. The only problem with this is the fact that we're not using spirits means we'll never be able to, even if we have a really good, well, skill set, we still won't be able to win. That's because we'll be taking damage, but because we can't defend ourselves, we'll be taking less damage than the boss. Meaning we'll always lose before the boss. And this causes a problem. So even if you were able to beat all the bosses perfectly, all 4 of the other ones, Rathalos and Giga Bowser in particular, and I think you could even make an argument for Ganon and the second phase of Dracula's fight, all of these would still cause more problems. The only reason we were able to beat them on their own is we got very lucky. But having that luck 4 times in a row, as well as doing perfectly on all the other bosses, is just feasibly impossible. Now, in this attempt, it's actually pretty average for my other attempts, where I'd be able to beat one boss, and then I would die on the next. My record on this was actually 2 bosses down total. And I have to beat 6 bosses total. So I think you guys can understand the problem with this. Also, you might be noticing that I used DK and Bowser. That's just because they did enough damage to actually somewhat impact the boss's health bar. Next ahead, I went ahead and took on Gallium, I believe. Yep. Now, Gallium is one of those bosses that telegraphs, yes. But one thing else to note is, yes, he telegraphs, but that doesn't make him easy. These bosses all still move incredibly fast, even for their size. And one mistake, and you're gone. So yeah, I think feasibly, or possibly, yes, this would be possible. But you'd have to be so incredibly lucky that I don't think it's feasibly possible. Especially for someone of my skill level. There are people way better at Smash Brothers that have a higher chance of being able to do it. But even though I've been playing the spiritless World of Light, it's still this difficult. And because of that, in the 3.0 update, I think it's impossible. It's a good thing that the 4.0 update came out and introduced Hero, who has insta-kill moves. But that's useless. No, it introduced something even more useful. A very easy mode for World of Light. So let's go. Now immediately we're going to change the difficulty to very easy. We're going to go ahead and equip all of the other people that you guys wanted. Because if I'm going to change the difficulty to very easy, I might as well have it be with the characters that you guys wanted. And immediately we can see some changes that are going to be extremely helpful. One being that the spirits, or the spirit fighters or puppet fighters, are actually dying quicker. Second, you might have noticed that there was no spinning pinwheels on Darkon. And in fact, Darkon and Galeem don't ever directly attack with very easy mode on. Although, since we already beat it with easy mode, I feel pretty okay about having it very easy for this portion. Now, the whole reason this is going to be helpful is it's going to be leveling the playing field for the boss rush. Because if we can beat a boss in 220 hits instead of 500, it's a lot easier. Especially if, instead of doing 90% damage from one attack that the boss gives, we might only take 45. These defense and offense buffs extremely help us in our case. And, I mean, look at this. You can actually see Rathalos' health bar go down every time we attack. Now, does this make this incredibly easy? I still wouldn't call it a cakewalk. I mean, keep in mind, you are still going up against 6 bosses. But it does at least level the playing field. It makes it at least possible. One reason that the bosses are going down so easily for me, I believe, is because I've been fighting them so many times, well, I already know their patterns for some of the easier ones like Galio and Marks. Giga Bowser, because it's still so much like a fighter, I ended up losing a life there. In fact, I lost Mega Man as well. But with Simon, I was actually able to take him down. Next up, we have Marks. The only problem with fighting Marks is the fact that I'm doing it with Simon. And Simon, the only way he can really hit Marks is with the axe. Or with the whip with up tilt or an up smash. But it doesn't really matter as Simon's able to tank through a lot of Marks' hits and is able to make it. Although he's not able to make it through Ganon. But now it's time to try again. Because we made it through 5 instead of out of 2. And that's a pretty big improvement. So I go ahead, take down a couple of the bosses. But I ended up stopping here because I was already up so high on percent that it would have been a waste to keep on going. Next we have this attempt. I started on Dracula, who goes down pretty easily, where I only have 78% or 76% damage on me. Next up was Marks, who went down a lot easier this time, thankfully. And he left me with a whole 181%. We're able to get a heart container. We start off with 81% and we can take down Galio. Here we go. Next up we have Rathalos. Alright, we can hoard him off. And now we are on Giga Bowser, who actually we were able to go ahead and take down a lot easier than last time. Although we still do lose Simon. But hey, at least Kirby's able to take him down. Next up we have Ganon. The reason that Ganon's actually hard is because, well, Kirby can't really jump over Ganon that easily. That's why Mega Man was so good in the Ganon fight. But it doesn't really matter, and we're able to go ahead and now we're able to start on the Gleam versus Darkon fight. Here I do a little bit of testing to see how hard the fight actually is. And I get pretty far through it, but it didn't go so well near the end, to say the least. I ended up taking just a tiny bit of damage. But I realized something. Why would we ever let Mega Man win this? He's not the right person. So, because of that, I ended up losing both of my lives. And instead, we're going to be taking this on again. So let's go through this. Now, the reason that I'm going to be focusing on Gleam at the very beginning, and then switching between him and Darkon, is for one major reason. When either of them get into their stun phases, the other will go ahead and do a pretty powerful attack to do a ton of damage. For example, when Gleam gets stunned, Darkon goes ahead and, well, let's just say it does a lot of damage. Next up we have this super powered sort of force field attack that isn't that hard to avoid. Next I do damage to Darkon a little bit in order to get him stunned. Sadly, Gleam just attacked, which means that It'll take a moment for Galeem to do his attack on Dargon. But with that, both of the entities are about 1/3 of their health. So we're in the home stretch now. They spawn some figure players or spirit fighters or puppet fighters or whatever you want to call them, which we just need to get them away from us so that way when they explode, they just don't explode near us. And now, they're actually pretty much dead. Although, it's not easy to get rid of them. Now, they still do have that effect that other bosses have, where as their HP gets closer to their end, they actually have a higher defense. So now they're going to be taking damage a whole lot more slowly. So while it might look like they only have 1/8 of their health left, they probably have more, about 1/3 in all actuality. But either way you want to look at it, Galeem is pretty much, well, dead. But then you look at my own health bar. I'm already at 175 health, or percent. I have to take down Dargon and Galeem. I'm so close. But something tells me that Simon isn't the right person to take them down. Now, I do still end up taking on Galeem. Well, after these figure players. I go ahead, attack Galeem, and now he is gone. And this is where Simon loses, because he isn't going to be the one to kill Dargon. That's Kirby's job. We started this series with Kirby. We played through most of the game with Kirby. We're gonna finish it with Kirby. We have to avoid Dargon's attacks. But now, it's time to finish this. And with one solid whack, Dargon is dead. And there we go. It is physically possible to beat Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's World of Light without spirits and without the skill tree. We've done it. And hey, it only took us 26 parts. So let's go ahead and watch the end credit scene. The Master Hands and Crazy Hands fall apart, and so do Galeem and Dargon. They build up energy, and then they explode. And then we see the spirits. We have freed all of the spirits without the spirits. So, that's the end of the game, really. Now we reached the staff roll. And I should probably answer a few questions. The first obvious one is, what's next? Because this is one of my longest running challenges, since, well, December of last year. So what could be after this? Well, I'm actually trying to decide between 4 challenges that I have out there. The first one being Super Mario Galaxy Jumpless. The next one being beating one of the new Super Mario Bros. Franchise's games without jumping. Sort of like what I did for New Super Mario Bros. Wii. The next one being beating one of the new Super Mario games without touching the ground. Same as like New Super Mario Bros. Wii. And lastly, beating one of the new Super Mario Bros. Games without, well, with Luigi winning by doing absolutely nothing. That one is gonna be fun. If you guys want to vote on what you guys want to see, I'll have a community post up with a poll that you guys can vote on. But with that out of the way, this series is over. And now to only wait 17 months before actually creating an episode of The Games Must Go On it. I'm just messing with you guys. Although this one will be a pretty long episode of The Games Must Go On. But anyways, with that, we have reached the end. We can see Galeem, Darkon, and the title screen. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.